Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this panel on Lily's legacy. It's a great project that has been funded by the National Lottery Heritage Funds, and we're really glad that the National Lottery Heritage Fund might be here today watching this panel. In the office, in the Liberal Judaism office, we hear nothing but Lily's legacy. And so I am as excited as I hope many of you are to find out more about the great work that they have been doing. We have met earlier this week to pre-record this session, but we will be live following it in about 45 minutes in the studio to take all those questions from you at home, which you might have about how to find out more about Lily's legacy and how you can get involved. So please join us in 45 minutes in the studio to take your questions. I'm going to begin by moving my way around this panel and asking them to introduce themselves and their connection to Lily's legacy. And we're going to begin, it's only fitting, with you, Shaan. Please let everybody at home know who you are, if they don't already, and what Lily's legacy means to you.
Hello, everyone out there. So my name is Shaan Knan, and I am the project manager for the project Lily's Legacy, the Radical History and Heritage of Liberal Judaism in Britain. My full title is Heritage Project Manager. I've been working as a Heritage Project Manager for Liberal Judaism for the past 8 years. So I'm based at the Montagu Center there with Charlie and the team and so many amazing people. And I've been, had the privilege to run wonderful projects that are supported by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, as I said, for nearly a decade now. And yeah, so Lily's Legacy, the Radical History and Heritage of Liberal Judaism in Britain, is our latest lottery heritage project. We started it in November 2018. So it's been going on for nearly a year and a half, and we're sort of coming now towards the end of the project. But before we get there, which is part of the exhibition we're going to be talking about, let me just recap a little bit and tell you how this project came about and what actually the objectives are and what we have been trying to achieve. So the idea of this project we've created together at Liberal Judaism, the team, having run so many wonderful oral history and archive projects. We realized that we have such a rich history and we have so many wonderful, inspiring, amazing community voices, pioneers, including our founders in Liberal Judaism history and heritage. So there is definitely a project in there. We must collect those oral histories. We must have a platform, a better platform, a new platform for all these voices, for these different communities across the UK, to talk about the vision of Liberal Judaism, how Liberal Judaism evolved in their eyes, from their own perspective. So not in the history books, but literally from the people themselves. And of course,
Shaan, let me ask you, just before you continue, it's really fascinating how it came about. But I know that at home, they're going to be, we last time I looked, we had over 800 people registered for the conference. And not all of them will be Liberal Jews. Not all of them have grown up like I have with the 3 M's ingrained in their blood. And they might be asking themselves, I don't know where they've been if they are, but just in case they're asking themselves, who was Lily Montagu?
Okay, well, I think to get a full answer, you will have to explore our exhibition, if you haven't, which we have been featuring all this biannual weekend, which is entitled Lily's Legacy, Voices and Visions of Liberal Judaism. But Lily Montagu, as we say in our exhibition, we consider as the prime founder of the liberal Jewish movement in the UK. Together with the other, as you said, the 3 M's, namely are Lily Montagu, Claude Montefiore, and Rabbi Dr. Israel Matuk. And those wonderful, our pioneers have founded together Liberal Judaism, starting from approximately, there are quite a few key dates, but we say one of those dates, it was 1902. So over a century ago. And so that was, well, I'm not going to go deeper into the story, but I think for me, this goes back to the title. Of course, Lily's legacy is also dedicated to our other founders and pioneers. But it's sort of been for me a journey with Lily, really working at the Montagu Center, hint, hint. And having always felt that Lily Montagu was a very special person, because if you look back at that time, you know, women weren't really usually in leadership positions, and especially not in faith communities. So for someone like Lily Montagu coming out and saying, you know, I want to create a movement that is different, that is a liberal movement, a liberal Jewish movement, a progressive faith movement, I found that always really fascinating and inspiring. So that's where the name comes from, and that's the core really of our history.
Thank you, Shaan. That's really interesting. And then I know that you haven't done this, although you've coordinated, you haven't done this alone. You've had some really important volunteers helping you bring this material together. And I want to come to you, Sue. Maybe you can introduce yourself, but also tell us a little bit about what the process of collecting these histories has been like.
Hi, I'm Sue Temple. I heard about the project online one day. I was just looking through some, I don't remember the website, but there it was something about this project that just captured my imagination. And luckily I happened to bump into Danny Rich that following weekend, and there he was. And I asked him about it. He told me to call Shaan, and that was the beginning. So I was in from the very beginning, for me, at the beginning of the project. And one of the key benefits of that is that I had the opportunity to contribute to the scope and design of the actual interviews themselves. So that meant that we had 2 days of quite intensive training, which was fantastic. The first day was, what is an oral history? And I came to the project confident that I'd be able to do interviews, because I've done a lot of that in my working life. But I didn't know what an oral history was, and I didn't know how that would differ from running an ordinary interview, and it is very, very different. So we had the training on day one, was that defining, scoping, understanding, and there's a lot of legal stuff to understand as well, because somebody might tell you something that someone else in their family isn't happy about. You have to have all kinds of disclaimers and caveats, and it was complicated and complex, and it was very, very interesting. Day two was a bit more challenging because it was the technical side, and Shaan introduced us to this rucksack of equipment that we had to take into people's houses and use. And I think pretty much more or less everyone on the team found that a bit daunting at the beginning, but we got there. So armed with what wasn't exactly a questionnaire, but was more a sort of aide memoir of themes that we wanted to cover in each interview, we went in sometimes to people's homes, sometimes we had interviews in schools, it depended. And so the pathway wasn't a linear one, as it might be in a normal interview. It just meandered around. But particularly, the way I did it was I made sure that each of those subject headings were covered by the end of the session. And it was absolutely fascinating. People were so generous with their time. It's been a massive privilege to have been allowed to be in someone's home or in their life for an hour and listen to these stories. Obviously, I knew about Lily Montagu in name, but I didn't know about her. I've read about her in theory, but this was a marker for the life of women in Judaism. It was fascinating from that point of view. A century since the first woman actually stepped up and said, let's do things differently. And that came out enormously in the interviews. There's so much to say about it.
Do you think you could give us a sense of what some of those questions you were asking people were?
Gosh, yeah, absolutely. The first question was how are you a liberal Jew? Were you born into liberal Judaism? Did you marry into it? Did you convert into Judaism from another faith? Are you a reluctant liberal Jew? A whole range of things. There were a number of my interviewees who were refugees. They came from Germany as children, and majority of those who I spoke to anyway had come from very orthodox German backgrounds, and because of the way their lives unfolded once they arrived here, for lots of different reasons, they found that there was liberal Judaism, and they were absolutely knocked out by the prospect of being able to be Jewish without all that heaviness and the sort of constricted life that they'd known before.
Thank you, Sue. It's really interesting. And Mike, you came in slightly later, but I wonder whether you can share some of your experiences.
Yeah, delighted to. So I'm Mike Beral. I'm a member of the Liberal Synagogue Elstree. I've had a lifelong association and involvement with liberal Judaism, as well as my local congregation. When I retired about 18 months ago, one of the things I said I wanted to do more of was employ my video skills. There are lots of keen photographers, but rather fewer people who play with video. And so when I suddenly came across this project, it was a fabulous combination of the right time, the right place, and the right people. So I had a conversation with Shaan and got to understand what the aim of the project was, and particularly how the oral histories were going to work. And as Sue has said, oral histories are in a lot of depth, and that's fine. But by definition, there's a limit to the number of people that one can go and talk to and how many stories one can capture. So Shaan and I agreed that what we maybe could do with video is go and talk to groups of people, particularly in various congregations, and ask them a fairly simple question. What's Lily's legacy to you? What's liberal Judaism to you? And what we ended up with were a whole series of short anecdotes, if you like, 5 or 10 minute clips of individuals, each answering that question in their own way. So we weren't trying to cover the whole of their life history, the whole of their liberal Jewish story, but just something that was really important to them. And so what we've ended up, if you like, is Sue and her volunteer colleagues have captured the depth. And through video, if you like, we've captured the breadth. We've been able to engage far more people, but not going in as deeply into the stories. And those stories have then ranged from everything from people's perceptions of why music is important in their liberal Judaism, how it's changed. Some wonderful anecdotes about individual rabbis, very formal and maybe slightly less formal. Individual stories, of course, of how they came to liberal Judaism, what's important to them. And so, yes, we've gathered that breadth.
Thank you, Mike. Sorry, please continue.
But then all of a sudden, COVID-19 hit us. And of course, the world changed. And suddenly, everybody was Zooming. 6 months ago, we hadn't really heard about it. But now here was an amazing opportunity to get out to an even larger number of communities. And so in the last literally 6 or 8 weeks, we've gathered a lot more video type content, in this case on Zoom. And so all of that also forms part of the Lily's Legacy Project exhibition.
Sounds really wonderful. And I love hearing stories of how people have been creative in the time of COVID and the opportunities that it's given us to connect in a really different way. And that combination of liberal Judaism as a home for people's Jewish story really comes alive in what both you and Sue have shared with us. Rabbi Dr. Miri Lawrence, hi, big title. We often hear another big title, which is that of curator. And I think for many of us, we hear that in association with art galleries or museums. Can you tell us a little bit about what it means to be the curator of Lily's Legacy?
Well, I think that some of the aspects of being a curator in a museum is exactly the same for this. I think key and sort of the original meaning of curator is somebody who kind of keeps things safe. And I think what's really important in this exhibition is really keeping people's stories safe and keeping them, preserving them for the future and presenting them in a way that really gives credit to as many people as we can get involved in the project. So in one respect, a sort of protector and keeper, another way, really selecting what material is going to be used. And I think because of the nature of the project, one of the key things that I wanted to do was to have as many participants involved in some way so that all of their stories were represented. And I think that's one of the great things about the online exhibition, because we have the audio podcasts, we have text, we have the videos, we have the Zoom videos, and then we can keep hold of the transcripts as well.
Just remind us, Miri, we can find that, can't we, at Lily's Legacy project.com, and you can see that banner across your screen, so people can go there and see what you're talking about with the podcasts and the videos. Thank you.
Thanks. So there's a load of material in there for people to look at.
And how did you go about choosing which themes you would cover in that?
So that was partially dictated by the work that the volunteers had done. And I think what's different about this project, I particularly was sort of laughing about my title, but because I had just done an oral history project from scratch, it was quite a challenge for me to come in where I hadn't conducted the interviews or chosen the main questions or the themes. So initially I had to play catch up, because you remember those conversations, and then coming and listening to them, it's a different feeling. But looking at them, as well as the questions that you could see, there was a pattern that had been asked in each of the interviews. Certain themes came out really strongly. And so really I chose the themes by discussing with the volunteer groups. We had a training session about being a curator and how that works. And then really together, we sort of worked together to say which are the main themes, what might be added that we hadn't perhaps thought about initially, but also how do we get this to as few themes as possible? Because if it was too broad, then it's just lots of different bits. And I do believe we might have a bonus section in the videos, because there are some anecdotes and contributions of communities which I think are relevant not only to the Jewish community or the liberal community, but for interfaith or people who want to learn about Judaism, which we really want to include, that may not have fallen into one of those categories, but would be a real missed opportunity, particularly for the way that this project has evolved and all the people that are involved and that we want to reach from it.
Thank you so much. I'm going to come back to you for my next question, although I'm going to give all the panel a chance to answer it. But I'm really interested, particularly with you, Miri, is about what your highlights of being with this project are. Like me, a female rabbi in the liberal Jewish movement, perhaps felt the weight of Lily and her legacy sitting on our shoulder, and I wonder what's been your specific highlight about working with this project, or one of the stories you've heard?
I think really, like you, not only did I grow up hearing about Lily, but there was a large photograph of her at South London Liberal Synagogue that you kind of passed. So she was literally like a physical presence, and people would talk about her all of the time. And although I knew a bit of her history, it was absolutely fascinating to hear stories of people that actually knew her. So that in a way was a highlight. And also I had a really happy journey into the rabbinate, because by the time that I went to Leobeck College, there were, I think, 11 women rabbis before me. And through this project, really appreciating how Lily Montague was absolutely key, and really dedicated her whole life, not just to women, but to the community, is absolutely amazing. But the real highlight for me, I think, was really when we moved to Zoom, that I think that there was such an emotion about the community because we were all processing what lockdown meant. And so people spoke with great emotion about what liberal Judaism means to them, what their community, and to see, this was also in Mike's first videos, where you see the interaction between congregants and the love and the humour between them. To capture that, when I've looked at some of the videos and listened to the podcast, I've been absolutely choked because it's really nostalgic for me. And everything kind of falls into place and has such huge relevance. It's been an amazing journey, absolutely amazing.
Thank you, Miri. It's such a privilege really to hear that way that the connection happens so deeply between what's someone's heritage and then into the way it can influence their current understanding of their own life and their connection to their Judaism, but the impact that actually that has universally outside our community as well. So thank you, Mike. Miri mentioned there one of her highlights being that move onto Zoom. Have you got a different highlight you would like to share with us?
Yes, I think so. So the project gave me as a volunteer the opportunity to go and visit a number of different congregations, some of which I had visited before, some of which I hadn't. And what was fascinating was to hear both the breadth of the different individual stories, but also the commonalities. And one commonality that kept coming through were people who said, I wasn't born or brought up as a liberal Jew. I may have been brought up in Judaism or not in Judaism. But at one point in my life, I started looking around and I was looking for a shul or a community where I felt comfortable. And I came to XYZ synagogue, whichever one it was we were at the moment. And almost to a person, they said, and actually I just stopped looking. I knew I'd arrived. This was it. Why would I carry on looking from here? And I've stayed. And in some cases, one of our interviewees says, and of course, within a year, I was on the council, loading the dishwasher, and all the other things that you do as our volunteers. And at the other end, we've got interviewees who said, and of course, 50 years on, I'm still doing whatever it is they're doing. And I think this consistent picture, and let's be honest, the interviewees were self-selecting, so they were going to say they felt comfortable, but there was such an enthusiasm for, if you've found the home for your Judaism in a particular congregation, in a particular community, it's just no longer negotiable. It's where I am.
Thank you so much. Really moving to hear your accounts. Sue, please, would you share with us one of your highlights?
I would love to share my highlights. I talked to you earlier about the different themes that we ran through as we did the interviews. And it's just interesting hearing Mike and Miri, because the one that came through over and over and over each time was community. We talked about faith and family and background and a lot of politics. Rabbis were talked about a lot, I have to say. But ultimately, the number one thing which drives people is their sense of community and their belonging to their community. And some people had tried two or three liberal or progressive communities before they actually ended up at the one they're in now, as Mike said, for forever, making the tea. And it's very, very, very strong. Also, understanding the strength of the influence that Miss Lily, I have to call her Miss Lily now because the people who actually knew her called her Miss Lily. So that was huge. Because when you actually take a marker now, a century on, and compare where is liberal Judaism in comparison to some of the ideals that she started off with, I think people, she'd be pretty pleased. She'd be very pleased.
I think she would be very pleased and quite amazed actually as well.
I mean, obviously, on a different side of things, I've been chuffed to have learned so much. At this age, it's such a gift to be able to learn a new subject, a new way of doing things, and I've loved that. Thanks, Shaan. Great.
Well, Shaan, that's a perfect place to come back to you, really. I don't know whether it's a totally unfair question to ask you what your highlight of this project has been, but maybe you'll try. And also just tell us, for those people at home who I cannot see that there's any way they cannot fail to have been inspired by what they've just heard, how they can explore the project a little bit more.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm going to answer that question, but personally, but also in my role as project manager, of course, for me, the absolute highlight is to see it all coming together. And not just that, just like you said a little bit before that, Charlie, I didn't do this on my own. I'm literally just the person who brings everyone together to do this, to enables people to participate, to learn, and all the rest of it to share. So for me, it's just every day an amazing experience, and more obviously now towards where we see where the production is underway and the launch is just imminent. How many amazing people from all walks of life have been working on this for the past 18 months, starting from our Liberal Judaism Montague Center office, the support there, the enthusiasm, to obviously everyone involved in Liberal Judaism, all around, all the interviewers, also from all walks of life, all the contributors, including the interviewees, the people who have donated digital and also sometimes physical memorabilia. And a special shout out at this point, before I get to Alison Turner, who's the LJ archivist, who's also done amazing volunteering work for this project, to provide us with the information about historical items, to get shared images that we can use for the exhibition, and much more than that. Then I can't go into detail, but shout out to Alison Turner. She's been absolutely crucial to this project, and obviously the archive that we're going to be creating. I'm going to get there later, but coming back to the collaborative aspect, I can't even list up all the people, the amazing people from within, but also from outside the movement that have been part of this in this 18 months so far journey, and there will be more. And not to forget, this project is not just an eternal looking project. Really important is the outward looking aspect of this project. And we have, for example, a steering committee that's been also absolutely vital in this process, which is made up of over 15 people from completely different sectors and communities, including archives, museums, but also community groups, interfaith groups, and so on and so forth. And not to forget our wonderful oral history trainer that Sue mentioned, Verushka Calabria, who's also been with Liberal Judaism, doing the training for our volunteers for the past 8 years. So that's another really great thing, that there are also people from outside the community, outside Liberal Judaism, that keep coming back, that really, work with us, that create with us and share with us. And so that's for me personally, it makes me feel so fulfilled and excited that all these people, all these minds, these hearts, and come together, share skills, learn skills, produce something. And here we're about to launch something really wonderful, which again you should really explore. And this is leading to the question that Charlie asked. Yeah, so we have launched throughout this biennial weekend the Lily's Legacy exhibition, which you can access through the lilieslegacyproject.com website. You just have to go /exhibition and you'll find all the signposting on the landing page if you just get to the lilieslegacyproject.com landing page, and there you can navigate into the exhibition. The exhibition has various chapters which we call themes, and you just simply click on the theme that you maybe appeals to you at this moment in time most, and start exploring podcasts, videos, images from the archives, newer images, wonderful texts, blog spots, and all sorts of heritage materials. And then you might want to explore another theme and another theme and another theme. There's plenty to explore. And
so Shaan, people at home who may not be liberal Jews, so I know if I'm a liberal Jew, maybe my attraction to this project might be obvious. If I'm sitting at home, this is my first taste of liberal Judaism. Why go and explore the exhibition? What's in it for people watching?
I think even if you are not from the liberal Jewish community and you may not even know somebody, because obviously that's sort of the immediate, oh, you know, I know these people and I want to watch what they're saying. But even if you come from outside, be it from another faith community or non-faith community, I think community heritage is about people, and people, that's the human experience. And I think regardless of if we belong to a community, and in this case, liberal Judaism, we can always find connections. We can find the human connection. We can find the community connection. We can reflect. Everyone belongs to some kind of community or say identity group. And that's all what we're talking about, really. We're talking about people and their backgrounds, people and their journeys, people, what they believe in, what they don't believe in, the people they have come across, the people that have inspired them, what they've learned on their journey, where they want to go. So really, this is something that we all share as human beings. So I think all that packed up in a community heritage, it's a wonderful experience for everyone to actually explore and experience another community. So I would highly recommend for anyone outside liberal Judaism to explore this project, and who knows, it might actually inspire them to create their own community heritage and an archive collection, which again, I might be going fast forwarding, but this is actually the ultimate output of the project to create the Lily's Legacy archive collection, which will be, of course, part of the greater liberal Judaism archive collection, which is as a prime depository, the London Metropolitan Archives. So yes, archive creation is obviously a big part of this. And as I think it was Miri said, it is also about preserving heritage, and it's looking into the future. And as wonderfully, if I can quote Mike, who always said, it's like a time capsule, you know, and that's a beautiful to think that future generations can open that time capsule and see what people thought, you know, how they lived, where they wanted to go to, and perhaps reflect, oh, where did it actually go? So that's a wonderful thing, and not just, you know, for everyone, really, for all communities, including liberal Jews.
Thank you, Shaan. And we are drawing to the end of us having a discussion, because we want to leave some time for, I know that there will be questions from people at home. But bouncing off a little bit from what Shaan just left us, is about what have you learned? So we're part of the wonderful thing about these project is what the potential of one community has to teach us about ourselves, that goes beyond an individualized experience. And I wonder whether, before we move to questions, if as briefly as possible, and maybe starting with you, Sue, you could share with us a little bit about what have you learned about yourself through this project.
I've learned that I'm even more interested in other people than I always knew I was, but that was the big pull. It is just a huge attraction to me to be able to sit in front of somebody and learn about their life. And continuing from the previous chat from Shaan, other communities can learn from that, because we had a glimpse, particularly with the interviewees who are older. We got a snapshot of 20th century history as well, which was really, really interesting. I loved the learning. I loved the technology learning. I loved that part of it was great, and it made me concentrate on the never-ending question of where am I with my own belief, my own faith, and my own future in Judaism. It made me ask a lot of questions of myself.
Thank you, Sue, and I think it would be fascinating to hear some of the exploratory answers to some of those questions as well. Mike, same question to you.
So two things, I think. One is at the pure technology side. People who know me know that I'm fascinated with technology. But having this opportunity to get really into the depths of recording video for a very different purpose, a very specific purpose, has forced me into all sorts of different learnings, how to get the best out of the technology, how to make it as unobtrusive as possible, because there is a risk that it can get in the way of these sorts of very personal conversations. In terms of content, I'm not a great one for history. I never have been. It's never particularly fascinated me. But hearing people talking about their stories isn't history to me. That's their stories. And I guess, if nothing else, seeing how people's individual stories have formed them to where they are today, and in particular, what heritage that means we're now leaving, moving to the future, I found that absolutely fascinating as well.
Wow, thank you, Mike. And Miri?
Could I just add one thing?
Of course, Sue.
Onto that previously, I learned that an oral history, you don't actually have to ask a lot of questions. And that was very, very interesting, that you could actually sit in front of someone for over an hour and barely say anything and end up with that body that body of knowledge, which has been so fascinating. It's a totally different process to a normal interview. For that.
Thank you. Thank you. Miri?
I mean, I think I've learned a lot of things along the way in terms of skills, particularly curating, which I hadn't actually done before. And although in a sense I'd done that with my own project, it felt a very different responsibility coming into a project that was well underway and having a responsibility to all the people that were involved at that point. I think also from having worked alone in a sense for quite a long time to work in a team, and I was so lucky with this team because it was such a joyful experience all the way through. So it kind of, I've come away from it thinking, yeah, working in a team's brilliant. So a lot of learning skills, first of all, when we talked about making podcasts, I mean, we had Lucia who has made the podcast, but working with her for the content, they were things I hadn't done before and seemed like way beyond my capabilities. But obviously we had the people involved that we could work together and use our skills. But I think what I've really come away with, and I don't know if it's partly because of this historical moment for us and the way the project changed in the last couple of months, was really the visceral attachment I have to liberal Judaism. And I have to say, at every interview that I listened to, I wanted to go and meet the person who was being interviewed. I'm just thinking, this person sounds so lovely. The guy that Harry Hurst, who narrated the podcast, just falling in love with his voice. But I just felt overall, I feel so proud to be a liberal Jew, and particularly going back to the Zooms where people were very open, and also in the videos, and ending their, whatever they had to say with phrases like, thank you, liberal Judaism. And I just feel so proud to be a part of it. And I have been a liberal Jew all my life and really connected to it, but I feel doubly so from this. I really do.
Thank you, Miri. Shaan, I don't know whether you want to add something, whether after all these projects that you have been at the helm of, whether this project has felt more personal, possibly, and whether you've learned something too during it.
Yes, it's a fantastic question. I could probably reflect upon for a long time, but I'm not going to. So yeah, as with all the projects, actually, I think they are personal. They are part of my journey as much as, it sort of takes its course, and they become part of me because they're part of my journey. And it's not just a project I work for, it's much more than that. Obviously this project, working at the Montagu Center and then listening to all the liberal Jewish stories has also been an incredible journey for myself as a liberal Jew, having been part of this movement now for God knows, 15, 16 years. And I think I've learned from a personal perspective about that, about me, myself, my heritage, my identity. Again, like, not to echo, like the kind of, but echoing Miri's words, it's just, made me aware of like how proud and happy I am to be part of this community, how much I feel that is my community. But as a project manager as well, of course, there have been challenges along the way, plenty. And sometimes, it of course feels like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? But there's always been a solution, and there's always been a constructive solution. And these solutions have not been, and again, I repeat this again and again, would have not been possible without all the amazing team members, from the core team to the Liberal Judaism staff, to all the volunteers and the steering committee, the youth advisory group, everyone that's been involved. And for me, obviously, that's increased also, I would say, my personal, but also my management skills. And I would even say, and maybe you can answer that, Charlie, as well, it's actually obviously meant a lot for us as an organization to grow, and specifically around resilience. And of course, community heritage is always important, but I think Liberal Judaism and also the Montagu Center office, we've learned a lot in this process, and which we can build upon and create perhaps other projects from that. And there's so much possibility that's being created, and I feel that's part of again my answer, the possibilities that's created for me professionally, personally, as a Liberal Jew and beyond, that I actually really appreciate about this journey. And there's more to come.
Thank you, Shaan. I have really enjoyed hearing, and I know that we're going to have questions from our audience at home. I would really like to take some time to explore what Shaan just asked me myself, but I can certainly say that I think where we are in terms of Liberal Judaism at the moment is in a unique place of having confidence, of being really self-assured that we have something that we've inherited from Lily Montagu and from those who went before us, that has allowed us to still have much work to do, to inspire, to reach out, to have porous boundaries that allow so many people to come into our movement, and that should leave us feeling confident about the future that we have ahead. And I hope that this conference as a whole, as well as particularly this session, have given people at home a little insight or a little boost into feeling that even if we are in our own homes and making our own small part of Lily's legacy, that actually we're part of something so much bigger than ourselves, and that we can be very proud of our little movement that started from a small seed but has really come so very, very far. And here we are, still in our own homes, and obviously a few days later, and it's wonderful to see all of you. And we have been fielding a lot of questions that have come in from home, but everybody out there, if you've got more questions, then please, we will try in the short time that we've got left to get them to you. But the question that keeps being repeated, and Shaan, I'm going to come to you to see if you've got an answer for it, which is, can we continue to add to this wonderful resource with further interviews? So I think there are so many people out there, and this one's come from Tamara, but we've seen it from many other people. Yes, another one from Paul Silvermeyer, which is, can people still be interviewed, Shaan?
I think I will have to defer this question to people like Miri, Sue, and Mike. Miri, what do you think? I say yes.
I say yes if somebody will do the transcribing, which is was the longest job. But yes, I think we should continue to add to it. And I think, the more we can get more people involved, fantastic. So I'm up for it. I just need a transcriber. So anybody,
well, you hear them out there. If somebody wants to volunteer their transcribing skills, then the Lily Legacy team is really up for recruiting. one other question which I loved that came in was, is there somebody that you are desperate to interview, or is there a story that that you would like to still hear? And I'm going to give you the power into your hands of also transporting to wherever you want, back in time, forward in time. What is the Lily's legacy story that you would like to capture? Shaan, let's come back to you first.
Well, my answer is probably not what you want to hear, but actually the beauty of this project and other oral history and heritage project is that every story is amazing. I'm hearing so many times when I meet, like, say, a liberal Jewish community member, and I say, oh, we're doing this project, and why don't you tell us your story? Oh, no, I don't really have any, exciting story. I've just been, I have a family, I work, I'm a part of a community. And then when you actually get to speak to that person, the most amazing, beautiful story comes out. So I think every story is amazing, and every story counts. And so I couldn't really decide if there's a particular story that I would be looking for at the moment. I want to be surprised, because I think there's so much more there. There's so many more voices out there, and so many visions, as the title of our exhibition, Voices and Visions of Liberal Judaism. So that's my answer, but perhaps Mike, Miri, or Sue can answer this in a different way.
So I don't think there's any one individual that I would say that we have missed. As Shaan says, we've got a wonderful mosaic, a wonderful mixture of voices from different backgrounds, from different communities. If we're underrepresented, I guess we're still underrepresented by the future generations of liberal Judaism. We've got some great input from people who are actively involved with LJY Netzer today. We're probably less well represented by those who went through LJY Netzer 10, 15 years ago and aren't yet fully re-engaged with their liberal Judaism as they build the next generation. So that's the part which I would say, if anything, we're underrepresented. There's a comment that Shaan kindly quoted of me earlier on, which is that what we've built is a time capsule here. And in 50 years' time, when somebody opens up this time capsule and says, so what was liberal Judaism all about in the year 2020? There's that little part of our community who maybe are underrepresented, and I'd love to still be able to fill those gaps.
So you heard that here. Paul's offered to transcribe, well, at least his answer interview, but maybe there'll be other people out there who'll offer to transcribe. And
email me, Paul, please.
And Mike's made a big shout out for the underrepresented generation, who I think are the ideal candidates for our passport scheme anyway. So we'd like to hear from you in many, many different ways. And I hope this weekend has inspired that generation and that group to want to be involved again and re-engage with their liberal Judaism. Sue or Miri, is there somebody that you would like to hear from?
You mentioned that we could be time travelers, and I think it would be great if we could interview someone who was around when Lily was around and see what do they actually think about what she was trying to do and the changes that she was making to the practice of Judaism. I think that would be extraordinary if I could travel back in time. But I certainly agree with Mike that the kids, it'd be lovely to have some more interview with the kids currently. That would be marvellous.
Thank
Can I just throw in before we put the mic over to Miri, that actually some wonderful people who were part of some interviews with LJY Netzer have now, we're going to meet from next week, and we're going to create a project within the project which is called LL The Next Generation. So sounds like a sci-fi movie already, if you're asking me. So I'm really looking forward to working with many, many young people on that from next week. So here we go. Into the future.
Wow, thank you. You heard it here first. Thank you, Shaan. Miri.
On the subject of transcribing, I wanted to put a vote in for Mike, because we were struggling with the labour of love of doing all the transcribing, but he came along with some new software and it changed our lives.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you. Miri.
So obviously, I echo what everybody else has said about particularly young people and some people that maybe didn't realise about the project and would like to be involved. But I would really like to go back in time. And one thing that really made me think was in one of the Zoom interviews with some of Lily's family, including Rabbi Rachel Montague. A number of people that we interviewed really owed their lives to Lily, who brought people over, and particularly rabbinic students. And Rachel mentioned that possibly one of those people was Regina Jonas, and that she made the decision to stay with her mother. And we know that she then perished in the Holocaust. And that kind of blew my mind, because I just thought the course of liberal Jewish history could have been completely changed if Regina had come over to this country, and I hadn't made that connection.
Miri, do you think you could just, that there will be people who, for you and I, Regina Jonas feels like a very much part of our history, but there will be people outside of here who won't know who she is. Could you just...
So she trained as a rabbi in Germany. And I'm just trying to think off the top of my head if she was actually ordained or if it was, I can't hear you.
She was ordained, although more of a private ordination, we think.
Yeah. So presumably, had she come over to this country, even if it was a private ceremony, she was officially ordained as a rabbi. And there's been a lot of debate as in the course of this as to whether Lily would have wanted to be a rabbi. We know that she preached. She did talk about that the time would come for women rabbis. It just wasn't quite time yet. So from that point of view, that just historically really fascinated me. And the other person I would have liked to have interviewed was her sister Marion, because everybody talks about Marion. It was Lily and her sister, and I would just be interested to know what it would be like being Lily's sister, that people were clearly really, really fond of, but it's really Lily's name that has become synonymous with liberal Judaism. So
thank you, Miri. Yeah, really fascinating answer. I'm really conscious of time, and that there's still so much that people want to know. And one of the questions that people would like to ask is, what is in the exhibition? So what can they find in there? Shaan, should we begin with you and then we'll come to Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, the exhibition, you can enter the online exhibition via the lilieslegacyproject.com website. From either the main site, and you also found exhibition a drop-down menu. You click, you arrive on that page, and then you've got the introduction, which I recommend reading. It's a great introduction written by Miri with the volunteer team. It's fantastic. And then you can choose in the drop-down menu 10 different themes, and perhaps Miri can later on, if we have the time, talk a bit more about that. But and then you choose what interests you most perhaps today, and you click on that, and then once you click on the theme, you arrive at on a different page, a theme page, and then you will find again blogs, texts. You find a podcast for each theme. The podcast, some of them you've actually been able to listen here throughout the biennial weekend already, and we've got a wonderful, amazing selection of videos, and that's when I then zoom over to Mike to continue with us.
So there's something like 90 different video clips within that exhibition across each of the 10 themes. Most of them were recorded as group sessions within various congregations. And in the last 8 weeks or so, we've suddenly moved to Zoom as well and managed to collect a whole lot more video content as well. So yes, it's a real multimedia digital exhibition. And that will be at least part of its permanent home. All of the material will formally be deposited with the London Metropolitan Archives. That'll be its long-term home as well. And of course, all of this, we must remember to acknowledge our sponsors, the National Lottery Heritage Fund, who are a major sponsor of the whole project, leading to this today, its launch.
Absolutely. None of this would have been possible without the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and we are really, really grateful for their partnership with Liberal Judaism, which has brought so much richness and diversity to not only our understanding of ourselves, but our outreach and into the larger community. So we're very, very grateful, and we know that they are too very proud to have partnered with Liberal Judaism again. Miri, Shaan mentioned there about the themes in the exhibition. Could you just tell us a little bit about those?
Okay, so the themes really came from the interviews, although, as you heard Sue say earlier, there was some scope for where the initial questions were going to be. And then once the interviews had taken place, we looked at what were the key themes. So we start off really with the different ways that people came to know about Liberal Judaism and to choose it. And we then looked at youth and intergenerational aspects of Liberal Judaism. And we also looked at other key things that we think are really key, like gender equality and inclusivity and diversity, and an overwhelming feeling that everybody is welcomed into Liberal Judaism and that many people have found their Jewish home there. We also wanted to obviously look at Lily, but also some of the other founders and pioneers of Liberal Judaism. And many people remembered either rabbis or lay leaders as they were growing up. So we tried to include as many of those. And then really finish by looking at where we think we're going now, what we think Lily might have thought of us as we are today, and what we want in the future.
Thank you, Miri. Yeah, big themes. We've got a couple of minutes, and I want to come back to what you just said there, Miri, which is about what would Lily make of our legacy. And it feels like this is the last workshop session really of our biennial conference, and we're about momentarily going to join Rabbi Aaron for our take-home piece. But I wouldn't mind, I know it's a big challenge, but I wonder whether any of you could offer what Lily would think of the legacy of Liberal Judaism today. And maybe had she been a participant watching this conference this weekend, what would she have thought of the legacy?
I think she'd be really, really pleased with where things are now. Because if the things that we learned, that I learned during the interviews with people who may have actually met her, was that she was somebody that wanted this inclusive area of an opportunity to practice a religion without the constraints that had previously been there for people, and especially for women. And for example, making services on a Saturday afternoon so that young girls who were working could work in the morning, and that's a small example. But the way that Liberal Judaism has developed over this last century would be absolutely in line with what she had hoped for. I think she'd be delighted.
Thank you, Sue. Shaan, did you want to add something and to tell people as well how they can get in touch with you?
Well, I just wanted to add one of the quotes, and again, coming back to what's in the exhibition, it's full of quotes. Everything is based on what people told us. It's not a history book. It's literally the voices and visions of the Liberal Jews that we've interviewed. And thank you all those contributors again and again and again. We couldn't have done this without you. But Lily Montague said, I can't quote it like verbatim, but something on those lines, and you will see it in our exhibition. We try to define Liberal Judaism. Thank God we didn't manage. So I think that's so much really, you know, we can still do and transform our communities, our liberal Jewish communities, and it's just an amazing journey we're on. So I really need to take the opportunity to thank everyone so much, the whole team, the people in this room here, but Liberal Judaism, and also like the whole team. There is a great amount of people working on this, including our web designer and designer who's been like working on this 24/7 to make this launch happen. And you find the full list of thank yous and acknowledgements as well in the exhibition list. Please do go there, and if you know those people and meet them, say, wow, thank you, good job, because really everyone's worked so hard on this, and it's really important to acknowledge that. It's all about collaboration. It really is. And what I thought, it was wonderful this weekend to see like so many people that feature in our exhibition and in Lily's Legacy, either they were mentioned in people's oral histories or themselves were interviewees. For example, Danny Rich, Simon Bencher, Tamara, Joseph, many rabbis, Rabbi Mark Sullivan, Rabbi Janet, both Janets, and so on and so forth. Endless list. All these people were actually there, or Ed Kessler, and then we hear actually Joe Kessler. So it was like a constant bouncing off, and I thought that really worked beautiful, and another kind of collaboration. So I'm just, from my end, finish off with a huge thank you. I'm immensely proud of us, our team, the movement, and I can only say thank you, and to the National Lottery Heritage Fund for supporting this project.
Thank you, Shaan. What a perfect way to end. Thank you all for being part of this panel and all the wonderful work you've done on behalf of Liberal Judaism.
Contact me on Lily's Legacy Project. I've got, what's our email? Help me.
It's on the website. It's on the website.
It's on the website.
Thanks, Mike. Before I start something that's actually not true, you can always contact me via Liberal Judaism. We're obviously physically not there, but in the cyberspace. Just if you can't find a Lily's Legacy or me, contact the office and Montague Centre, and they forward
the message. This is the big disadvantage of not being on Zoom, is that I don't have the power of mute. We are now at the end of our time.
Thanks, Charlie.
And I do have to pass over to Rabbi Aaron as we begin our take-home process. Thank you, everybody.